Stephannie Bethany, it is so amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. You're an autistic YouTuber.
Thank you for inviting me.
I love your full name, Stephannie Bethany. It just has got such a nice ring to it.
Thank you.
You were diagnosed quite late in life. If you could maybe tell the people what age you were diagnosed, and also you feel that if you were diagnosed at a younger age that it would have helped you, and if so, how?
So I was diagnosed at 23. So for me, that was pretty late. I know there's others who actually wait even longer in life. So I didn't get like supports as a child or anything like that. I used to really think like if I had been diagnosed younger, like I feel like I would have been able to understand more about myself, and like my parents would have been able to as well. I think that if I had been earlier diagnosed with today's understanding, that would be more true. The more I think about it and more I see where maybe understanding and research was when I was younger, it's probably maybe a good thing that I wasn't diagnosed, because there was a lot of misunderstandings, and, and I don't know if I've enjoyed that the kind of treatment I could have been put under, but.
Exactly. That is so valid, right? Because I often ask my friends that are autistic, I'm like, yeah, would you have wanted to be diagnosed earlier? And most of them say yes, but then that's such a valid point. Therapy back then, it was extremely strict. And if you just think about like ABA back then, I know that there's no real good ABA and bad ABA, which we'll get to. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I spoke with Professor Stephen Shore, who I absolutely love. And he was telling me that when he was a kid, his parents started with basically music therapy, and how much it helped him. And I was also saying that it's such a modern approach for back then.
Yeah.
If you could have gone back and told your parents maybe 3 things what they could have done differently to maybe understand you better or support you better.
Yeah, so I thought about that a lot, actually. And I think one of the biggest things would be just to talk with them and like help them understand that like my emotions are very big and real to me, and that a lot of times when like I was what they might have perceived as like tantrums or being dramatic or stuff like that, it wasn't about trying to get something or manipulate them or anything like that. At that point, like in my world, everything had become a catastrophe, and it like a lot of times it would come down from either frustration or feelings of rejection. Even if they weren't real rejection, just saying no, you can't do that or something, just that feeling, and it would compound and get worse and worse. And for them, they're like, oh, stop being dramatic or stop crying, and that doesn't really work for me. So really, if they had known like how to work with me on like regulating my emotions, and like if they could have comforted me, like, yes, this is your feeling, I understand that you have this feeling, instead of like making a moral judgment about how I felt about things, I think that would have really helped me, because not only would it probably have helped de-escalate some of the situations, I think it would have been a really good tool, even just for me, not taking so long to learn how to deal with my own emotions.
That's such an important point, because I work with many autistic adults, and most of them are saying that not validating their emotions as a child has led them to be quite anxious. And I feel like there's a lot of work that we can do with our younger ones, just saying, it might not, this is the thing, is like, we're all feeling the same emotions, but it's for different things, right? And sometimes the emotions are massive for what some people think are small things, and they're really not small things. For that individual, that is the worst case scenario. And if we really just focus on self-regulation, self-awareness first, and then self-regulation, I feel like it could help people become also more independent and more positive. And
I think other than that one, I think being able to give me specific steps and an order of how to do things would have been helpful. Because when, like, for example, clean your room seems simple enough. Like, oh, well, if you haven't made progress, it means you weren't listening and you're not obeying what I said. But when I don't know how to approach this overwhelming task, I'm getting upset and you're getting upset because you think I'm being disobedient. And so for me, I think it would have really helped to let them know, like, I need you to tell me, okay, first let's do your clothes, pick up your dirty clothes. Okay, let's do this thing next, because then I wouldn't have been as frustrated and they wouldn't have been as frustrated.
I feel like that could be good for any person, to learn with quite specific steps, because it will make us more efficient, like all of us more efficient, because we'll know, okay, I don't have to do this part spotless. I just need to hang up my clothes, I need to sweep the floor maybe, and then I need to make my bed. That's it, 3 things, which makes the task also not seem so massive.
Yes, absolutely. And then the third thing would just be like to like clarify maybe for them that I do take things very literally and I'm not great at social things, and maybe to like more explicitly help me with those things. So like, instead of being like, why didn't you get that? Here's what's happening, and maybe this is how we respond in this situation. And not just expecting me to magically know or getting irritated that, like, because a lot of times I would be told things like, you know, because I would argue if you said something to me literally and I took it that way and you meant it a different way, we would get in an argument, obviously, because it seemed like I was like pretending, if that makes sense, like to take it one way to make an argument. So my mom would always be like, you know, you always have to have the last word, and why you always argue with me and stuff like that. And it's just because, like, you don't make sense. Like, you told me this thing and you don't make sense. I don't know, that I think that would have just been helpful to know that. Just, I think a lot of this is like, I didn't mean to be a bad kid.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess. So,
yeah, that's I mean, that's brilliant for a parent to know that and to say, because I think initially parents would think, oh no, they're just trying to be difficult. Like, why are you back chatting the whole time? I mean, that actually leads to my next question is, what are some of the subtle signs, the more subtle signs that you feel that parents can look at and say, oh, maybe my child's on the spectrum, rather than my child's being naughty?
Yeah, for sure. So like, I guess even borrowing that, like taking things literally, like you didn't mean it that way, but they seem to take it that way. Or if you say things that most children like will kind of go along with or like forgive because it's not 100% accurate, but it is like fun to say or fun to do, they're like, no, that's not right. This is how the things go, or this is how, like, these are the facts to what you're saying. That kind of response is kind of a clue. Something I have noticed as well is like a strong resistance or distress to making decisions. Not all the time necessarily, but like if it's, for example, you're in a store, so there is like kind of the outside pressure of time, and you know, here are the things, make a decision right now. I know a lot of autistic people will freeze up and freak out because they can't make that decision that quickly. So that one's kind of more subtle, maybe, that you don't necessarily hear so much about in like the list of things. Another thing is so like early signs of social masking. So I've seen one where I was in a discussion with someone and we laughed about something that this child clearly wouldn't have understood why it was funny, and she forced herself to laugh, and she goes, oh, and she starts laughing, and I was like, oh, sweetheart, because like she was trying to pretend that she understood, and that was something I did all the time, like force a laugh because I don't know what's going on, but you guys think it's funny and I'm supposed to understand. So noticing things like that, or like pretending to get things that they don't actually get, just to seem like they're on the same page with everybody else.
Yeah, those are really good signs to look out for. And even if you think about it, a lot of people, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and a lot of those characteristics they overlap. So
Yes.
even if your child might, and he or she might not have a diagnosis, but it's so good to notice these things and then interact with them in the way that makes sense to them.
Yes.
Even if they're autistic, even if they've got ADHD, even if they don't have a diagnosis, they're just neurodivergent. So, you know, it's just interacting with them more successfully, noticing these things, I think. But those are great. Do you have more?
I have a few more, sorry.
Yeah, no, I love them.
I was trying to brainstorm for that.
That's
awesome. Another one is like things like not being interested in the same like norms of maybe other children. So like there might be things that are super popular. I've heard from parent groups, like everybody knows like this show or this thing, and a lot of times you'll see that they're not really interested in those sorts of things. They'll be interested in their very own unique thing that might not trend quite as much as with maybe what's very popular at the time. And also not making friends their own age. This is something for me too. I usually would make friends who were much older than me, and I still have a lot of older friends. And then as I've gotten older, making younger friends. For some reason, just like, because it's almost like we're not on the same, it feels like we're not on the same developmental level almost. And so it feels more natural to make friends with people who might, for some reason, we click better at like age ranges above or below for some reason.
I think it might, like if I just have to think about it now, I think it makes sense because there might not be that much pressure on you're comparing yourself with that person because he's the same age or she's the same age. So you're thinking, you know, like if you're talking about something exactly what you said in the previous point, you said, you know, like they might not, you might not be interested in the same popular characters out there or popular movie stars, but that's okay because the older friend or the younger friend, they don't really know what's popular in that age group.
Another thing also is not enjoying the fun breaks in routines. So sometimes, you know, parents will want to surprise their children and they're like, actually today we're not going to school. We're going to go to the park and have a fun day. Where that break in routine is actually more distressing and upsetting than the fact that they don't have to go to school. It breaks my heart because I've heard this happen a lot where parents will try to surprise their children. There was one parent who they took off of work early to be able to eat dinner with their child, and their child was not about it because their parent was always at work at that time, and that's how things went. And they're like, why aren't they happy that I did this thing for them? And it's not that they're not happy to see you or they don't appreciate that you want to like have fun with them. It's that you broke the routine, and that's really hard for them to handle and deal with. So that's something I've heard as well. So,
very important, right? Because it's important to teach flexibility, but in a way that doesn't disrupt that person too much. We speak about this often because we've actually got a few courses where we work with parents, and one of the topics is prep talks instead of pep talks. Because I feel like afterwards it's like, oh, I should have done this, could have done that. And that just leads to more anxiety. But if you prepare somebody saying, okay, look, there's going to be a surprise coming up and we're going to go here. You can look at it online. I mean, that's a better surprise because they're actually prepared for the outing. And it's exactly what you said there. That's very important. You did a video on ABA and it was 2 hours and 11 minutes long, I think. And it was brilliant. I was glued to the screen every single second of it. I'm going to leave a link to your video as well. Your videos are so educational and informative, but yet unbiased. I feel like you do bring in your opinion when and if needed. But I have learned a lot, and I feel like parents could learn a lot from your videos. Do you feel that that's what your goal is, for parents to learn through videos and real experience? And do you feel like parents should do that, and courses and support that's out there? What should parents do?
Well, first of all, thank you, I appreciate that. And so like with what I'm doing, I really want to be able to access parents and anybody who wants to be able to learn, because I know sometimes when we cater maybe a lot of our opinions or thoughts to things, it can make it hard for someone to evaluate the information. And I think that parents, it would be, very beneficial for them to be able to look at the information that's out there and evaluate it themselves, because everybody's going to come to their own conclusions about things and maybe what they think is best for their child, for example. But yeah, being able to maybe go out there, see videos, or like you said, courses and resources, those are super important for parents to learn about, because when and of course, I don't know how it is everywhere, but a common thing I hear, at least here in the US, is you get a diagnosis, you maybe get like a little packet that's like, here's all the things your child might have wrong with them, and they send you away. And that can be really scary. You don't know what's happening. There's things that don't seem the same as maybe typically developing children, whether they're in your own family or you're looking around, and that can be really, really scary. So being able to learn about why your child is repeating words, or learn why they're flapping their hands, and why those things are, and that they aren't just like these scary things we gotta like control and get rid of, but their functions and what can also help in situations as well. I just think really information and knowledge is really, really powerful and can take away a lot of the fear that parents might feel around it. So
yes, and also when they're getting that diagnosis, they usually, exactly like you said, they usually get a few suggestions or recommendations, and they will take what the professional says because it's the professional, right? And we work with a lot of pediatricians that are very open-minded, and they would say, okay, try this out, but if it doesn't work, come back and we can give more recommendations, but also look around. Now, when they do look around, this is what the scary part is, then there's a lot of emphasis on ABA treatments. And I mean, from the experience that we have, and also I used to be an ABA therapist, right? So I went away from that, and we started with the more holistic support system, that it can be quite detrimental. So if it's done the way ABA is supposed to be done, it can be quite detrimental for our kids. And it's important for parents to know that they are the true experts. So if they feel like something's not right, it's probably not right. If they look at their child and their child's unhappy for most of the day, even for the majority of the day, something's going on that the child's not agreeing with. And then, we touched on this, but how do they navigate? I think what I'm hearing from you is that they should go on their gut and their intuition and see what's out there, and then kind of sift through it themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So again, finding the information, evaluating that. I think some good general guidelines when it comes to evaluating maybe services or therapies that are offered is, one, of course, anything that says that it's a cure or a quick fix, or like your child absolutely will be something. Someone's trying to scam you. It's not a good idea. Don't do it. Aside from the obvious, anything that is more focused on compliance or trying to make your child maybe fit in versus supporting how they think is something to be really wary of. Because as much as you don't like, one of the biggest arguments I hear is like, I don't want my child to be bullied, or they're doing this, like if I put them in all this therapy, like this person tells me, like they'll put in this work right now, and then, their future will be better. These are things I hear a lot. And some things to think about when you hear that is, your child is still a child. And children are supposed to be playing and learning naturally. Like, that's just how they do.
Oh, you just give me goosebumps.
And if your child is being told or being asked to work for hours and hours and hours as a child, that doesn't make sense. That's not what they're made to do. Like, children play, children learn the way that they do interacting with the world, and maybe they're doing it differently. And early intervention isn't a bad thing. Supporting children at a young age isn't a bad thing, but asking them to put in 40 hours a week of structured do this, that's not natural to any child. That's not just, you know, autistic children. Neurotypical children, you wouldn't ask them to do that either. So just consider that as well. Like if you're being argued with, well, you know, this is about your child's future, your child may be autistic, but that doesn't mean that they aren't still a child. And like you said, you know, whatever is your intuition about something, if you don't feel comfortable, you are allowed to stop. I know a lot of times, even for myself, it's hard to, because it almost feels like, well, I went through all the paperwork and I got the approvals and blah 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 to finally get into this program, and I don't know if I like it. If you feel any sort of way about it, if you feel like, I don't know about that person, I don't know about this therapist, I don't know about this method, stop. You are allowed to stop. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, this is not right for my child. Don't let people bully you into, you know, thinking that you don't know about your own child, because you do know about your own child. I think that's even with professionals who don't do maybe therapy, there's some doctors who will tell parents that they don't know what they're talking about, that their child really isn't doing X, Y, and Z. Then you're allowed to go find a different opinion. You're allowed to say, no, this person isn't listening to me. I know what I see. This is what's happening. And so with those things, again, yeah. So basically things that support the way that your child naturally learns, not, you know, piling on hours and hours of trying to maybe conform behavior, but and anything that violates maybe your conscience or even just any sort of feeling about it. Those are things to maybe avoid. And yeah.
Yeah, 100%, because like, you said that no child should be working 40 hours a week with no breaks. No adult should be doing that either. You should be taking movement breaks, or at least, you know, just, I don't know, go for a snack. And the other thing that I remember hearing a lot was, yeah, but everybody works for reinforcement. Everybody, you know, you work and then you get your salary. And I'm like, no, that's not how my life is run. I don't think, oh, look, wait, it's almost the 30th. You know, I'm getting happy now. I'm happy every single day because I'm interested in what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. So, I mean, I know that that's not the case for every single person in their job, but that would be the ideal world, right? But we can still create that for our kids. It can be interest-based. They can, if they like Lego, we teach them everything about Lego. We can do academics with Lego. It can be a fun scenario. And working for a small bit of like 5 seconds with the Lego is really that's not going to cut it. I don't think that's fair for anyone.
No. And like, I think that's another thing. Cause like, again, like you said, like, well, in the real world, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But your child's like 4. Like, you don't ask any 4-year-old to work in the real world. Exactly. Okay. When you're talking about working in the real world, most of the time, either you're like, some people are teenagers when they do, but you get more protections even then. So most of the time when we're talking about working in the real world, we're talking about adults who are old enough to know when they are in a condition that they don't need to be in, and they can say no. These are adults who understand how to juggle all these responsibilities, etc. So like saying like, oh, well, in the real world, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe for an 18 plus, maybe for an adult who is developmentally 18 plus, who can say no to bad working conditions. But you can't ask your 4-year-old to be a full-time working adult. That's ridiculous.
Well, if you do want to, then at least give them the other option and, you know, let them play for 40 hours a week.
There you go.
And then you ask them, do you want A or do you want B?
Yeah. There you go.
And also see like how happy they are. I was, you know, I had such a nice conversation with Professor Peter from Yale, and he's all about happiness and bringing happiness into your therapy and into your sessions, and just focusing on that, what makes that individual happy. Because innately, if we're happy, we're going to want to be working more. I need to tell myself to stop working because I'm so happy and passionate, you know? So I think if we can get that right with our kids, we're going to see more progress in terms of they're going to learn naturally. And that's the ideal scenario. That's what we're working towards. Stephannie, you're amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And I feel like everything you said we can do an entire course on everything you said because it's so helpful.
Thank you so much for having me.